Samnang, and I am the host of this podcast and the head coach at Peak Performance Academy. And we got a special guest here today. We're on episode 29. Can you guys believe that?
Congrats,
on. Yeah, thank you. It's been a lot of work. It's been fun at the same time and been a life changer. So let me tell you guys a little bit about our special guest here. Our special guest is a person that I consider a brother of mine. We're the same height. We're probably the same weight, but his name is Dr. Mohammed Usman Choudhry. So welcome to the podcast. So a little bit about Usman. I think you go by Mo, but I know him as Usman, but I've known Mo since the 9th grade in high school. We started, I think, before 9th grade, but we started becoming like really good friends when we started playing football and pretty much just digging around on the sidelines. And then we just became good friends and still good friends. And we want to talk about how we stay good friends for people that have busy lives and want to keep good friendships, and talk a little bit about our immigrant background, because we're both immigrants, and that's I think has molded a lot of us, and that has what kept us together or kind of close together and growing with each other. And he works as a full-time critical care intensivist with training in pulmonary critical care, right? Recently married and future father, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Welcome to the show. So give us a little brief introduction and fill us in and tell the audience of who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think your intro was fine. It's
I'm doing really good at this intro, huh?
No, it's good, man.
And some people are just like, yo, that's it.
That's it, man. It's
did my research.
Not much to it. It's I think we're all just people living lives. So it's but yeah, I'm Mohammed Usman. It's all the same. And currently doing Pulm Crit here in Virginia, down in the Northern Virginia area. So, and then just trying to live life, man, and just trying to keep in touch with the people that have been in my life. So,
yeah. Tell us a little bit about your where you're from, like, because I'm Cambodian American. We're both immigrants. I think that's what the topic of discussion is, that we've been friends for I believe, I mean, you tell me, one of the reasons why is that we kind of just grew up with a lot of nothing and then just kind of made something out of nothing. I met you in the 9th grade, and maybe I didn't know you before the 9th grade or the 8th grade.
Yeah. So it's I'm originally from Pakistan, in like a small village up north, and my dad moved out here in the 1980s, I would say, and then we moved out here later in like early 1990. So I was around 5 or 6. Yeah, and then it's a little bit different for sure. I think everyone's got a similar story, and I think even the kids who grew up here in the States, like, you can have very similar stories as well, in the sense of like trying to figure out where you belong, trying to figure out kind of where you're coming from and where you're going.
I mean, I think that's a very important story to tell, though. Sometimes I think you and me, we forget about it, that we have come from some kind of background that, like, not everybody has had this, right? Has had this. And you can either look at it as like a disadvantage or an advantage growing up. I think some people look at it as a disadvantage. I think the purpose, like, when we have our conversations and we reminisce some of our you're right.
Yeah, no. I'm recovering from like a cough, a lot of postnasal drip, and then it like settles. But no, I agree with you, man. It's that story's not well told. And I think growing up, you're like, you don't originally, I thinking back on it, like, I don't think I ever felt that I was out of place until I interacted with more kids.
Yeah.
Right. Until you're like in middle school and high school, then I felt like, hey, there's something definitely different. Even though like when I moved here, I was put into like ESL, you had to do like English as a second language, or
Yeah.
you're going through that language barrier. You're kind of learning, you're growing. But I was, in a sense, fortunate that when I came early enough where my language, uh, I adjusted pretty well.
Yeah.
So like if you talk to me now, I don't think anyone would assume that I was not born here. They would be like, oh, okay, second generation, third generation, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I think early years were actually not bad. They were pretty good. I think it's when you get into that middle school, high school phase where everyone's trying to kind of struggling with identity a little bit. You start questioning the things that make you you.
Yeah.
And that's a little different, but it was good. We had good friends. It made the process a little bit easier.
Yeah. I think that's
Yeah,
a common theme amongst a lot of people in that age, like during high school, where you're kind of like trying to find yourself, trying to find your identity a little bit and not get so
yeah,
lost in it. I think some people have regretted like how they acted. I guess our previous host, Danny, I'm sure you watched some of
yeah,
the podcasts. He's been really open about like some of the stuff that, he
yeah,
kind of like regrets doing, during the high school years and everything. But I
yeah,
think for me, like being a foreigner, like growing up, I think you could eat like there's some folks that I think that look at being an immigrant or just not having like the growing up here or like being established here as kind of like a disadvantage. But I think for me, like I guess perspective was always that, hey, look, we and my brother, like him, and I know your
yeah,
family as well too, like
yeah,
so that like family is a big part of foreign folks, Asian,
yeah,
brown, Indian,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
big on family. And I think that's one of the big things that I knew growing up. My brother, we always have this conversation is that like we grew up poor, but did we really feel like we were like poor? We just felt like we had so many people like
yeah,
around just to like support us. And that to me I think was one big thing that like really like drives me to this day is that like there were so many people that like supported me and us and stuff. Like I'm sure you have a lot of people in that you support as that
yeah,
supported you, and you're also supporting a lot of people as well too.
yeah,
um I'm the youngest of my brothers, but you're the oldest of yours, right? you're
yeah. I was
you're a
old.
family of three, but
Yeah,
you kind of taken more like a mentorship role, parent type to your family members, right?
yeah, yeah, man. It's I think I've been lucky enough that me and my siblings are pretty far spread out.
Yeah.
So, we're all between my brother, there's about a 6 year gap, and between me and my sister, there's like a 14-year gap.
Yeah.
So it kind of you are put into that kind of role automatically,
You're kind of like
and
a parent, right?
yeah, you kind of the parent. But yeah, growing up, it was you have a lot of family influence. You have a lot of relatives, cousins. Like there's a focus on staying close, and which is a little bit different. I would say not different. I would just say it's not common everywhere. And at least for us, it's in hindsight. I think it's what helps keep me grounded, and
Yeah.
probably same on your level as well. And then growing up wise, like you said, do we grow up rich? Do we grow up poor? Like we were definitely, on that lower income side, but it's like you kind of we were good with it. Like we embraced it. We had a good time with it. You kind of knew where you were on
Yeah.
things, and at least that like the crew of people that we were with, and at least growing up, you felt okay because you knew everyone else was kind of in that same boat. Like right
Yeah.
in your neighborhood, it's like, hey, we're in the same area. Like
Yeah.
we know where we're at. We know where we're going. Even when we would go out to games, things like that, it's you kind of knew where you were
Yeah.
in a good way and in a bad way. But it's I think that just when you have people of like minds, it keeps things a little bit easier.
Yeah. One thing I do admire about you is that like even though we grew up together and socialized and did our things and stuff, I think you always prioritize a lot of like your family and making sure that they were okay. How did you, because in the process of like helping, like you became like, it sounded like you became like a second parent. And if I
Yeah,
look at like, I have two older brothers as well too. They became almost like second parents, right? they're not close as age to me, and like same with you is like you have these two siblings and you want to get them, and be honest, like it, you should be very proud because they kind of followed into like your footsteps as well too, right? They kind of like
Yeah, it's I mean they're doing their own thing in terms of my brothers went into medicine as well. My sister kind of a subset of that, so
yeah,
they're doing good. I wish I could take the credit on those guys, but I think a lot of like what you're saying, it was how family was with us kind of growing up.
mm-hmm.
And what that left for me in that sense is that little role of responsibility. I think I'd be a whole different person if I didn't have the sibling effect. Like, all right, I have to do this because there's other people watching me.
Yeah,
And I think that helped a lot. And also, like, the expectations our parents put on us. Like, you see where, like, I know where my mom was prior to coming to the States
yeah,
and kind of the village life, if you would put it in that sense. And then
the
you
village
also
life,
see
yeah,
how that, like, growing up, my dad I wouldn't see him much. The man was out of the door before we woke up for school. And
yeah,
then he usually would be home later in the evening when we're asleep. So you
yeah,
see like other people like hustling in a way to make things kind of work. And you don't really fully appreciate it, I think, as a kid, but you still see it like someone's putting in the work. And and then the expectations were kind of set. Maybe it's the foreign mindset. I don't know. It was like, all right, like even at like age 10, it's like, what are you going to be when you grow up?
yeah,
And you're kind of like reminded on a daily. So there's always some of that in the background. And then I think we were lucky in the sense that some of that stuff stuck. Some of those, I don't think that effect is the same on everyone, but I think I was lucky enough to have it be like resonate to some level.
yeah. The values, I think a lot of it is the values that come down to it, and it's like and I see it, and I have it in my culture as well too. It's really just respect, right? Respect to like some of the folks that have kind of paved the way for you. And for me, like I've been in America since 88. I was born in 85, and we were refugees to America, right? We had
Yeah.
the genocide going on and a lot of turmoils, and we refugees, and we were fleeing the country. And when I was born, I was actually born in a refugee camp. It's a
Yeah.
story. I'm trying to get
Yeah,
my
man.
dad on the podcast to really tell us the back end story of like how we got here, and the efforts to get here and the sacrifices that he had to make. But understanding that, I think, is really the point. I think the message I'm trying to get across with like this podcast is that, or this specific podcast is that your roots, your backgrounds, the people that has supported you, right? I think that's part of what makes people successful, is really understanding that. So my parents, my family came to America in 88, and we landed in Falls Church and just kind of grew up with we came
Yeah.
into a house in Falls Church with like two other families. They were like my cousins,
Right.
second cousins, and we lived in like I don't know if it was a 3 or 4 bedroom house with probably like 12 people in it.
Yeah, man.
But I can tell you that was one of the most memorable things that I can remember about my childhood. I don't remember, there was like no worries or anything, but it was just a house full of cousins, aunts, and uncles of just like being around a lot of people. And I don't think a lot of people experience that, but I think that understanding like who's there, who's supporting you, even though like sometimes it might not even feel like you are being supported, but I think there is that thing, and I think it comes down to like a lot of like respect for like the people that have came before you as well too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No,
man, I
that's
think
good, man. It's similar stories. I think there's so many stories of that. Like, hey, we moved here, but it wasn't like we had our own place. We moved in with another family and another family. And, when
mhm,
we moved, we were with my cousins for at least 3 to 4 years until my dad could like get on his feet to buy like a little townhome and kind of slowly expanded from there. But I think that exposure to like family does a lot. And I'm sure there's like data and stuff on it, but it's like you see other kids as well, and you see the troubles that they get in, And sometimes you learn right behavior because you're seeing it on
Yeah.
so many directions, or you see what not to do because you saw someone else kind of in that field get in trouble. But also as a kid, now you also have way more eyes on you. Have not just your parents on you, you have your other relatives on you, the people in that shared kind of home or community. And in a way, it for me, it kind of kept me in line. Like like I know if I do something stupid here, I have so and so like
Yeah, you're
who's a
gonna get your
family
ass
friend,
whipped.
they're watching me, and and we joke about like the auntie network, which is like mom's on the phone, man. Like you could do something at school, and by the time you got home, your mom found out from some other person like super quick. And so that kind of kept me in check, and it also kind of kept some standards in check because you would see older cousins doing things, and you're like, oh, I should be able to do that too. Like, when we're in high school or we're in like young age and you see your older cousins like going off to college or, buying a car, and you're like, it's doable. And kind
Yeah.
of how do I get around doing that? So
I mean, that
that,
is that is a benefit of having like a lot of like family members
yeah,
around, is that there is a thing of like you have some kind of standard that you have to hold because other people are watching you as well too.
yeah.
Um,
And I think it's very different than like friends. Like my buddies could do like all these type of things, or even in school, like your friends could have this or that, but it didn't feel the same, at least to me, because I was like, oh, okay, that you're coming from a completely different vibe, completely different environment. But when you see your brothers or your family who have the same exact kind of setup as you do, then you're like, okay, it hit a little different. So that
yeah,
always helps. I think community
yeah.
and family is always like a big thing.
Well, run us a little bit of the listeners about how you got to where you're at now. I know you've been in the grind because I've known you out. I think after we graduated high school, you started going deep into your studies and George Mason, and
Yeah,
then I remember going to med school. I think one of the fondest memories that I have, and this is Paul Zamudo.
yeah.
That's when
Oh
I
yeah,
met
yeah,
him. Is when I
yeah.
visited you in New York
Paulie.
City, and you
Yeah,
the funniest story I tell everybody, like I visited Mo in New York. It was Brooklyn, right? I think it was
yeah,
Brooklyn,
yeah. Excellent.
and you had this little shithole of an apartment.
Yeah,
And the funny thing, the only thing I can remember is like it was hot. It was in the middle of the summer. It was in the shithole of an apartment. It was like an 8x8,
yeah,
and I don't think it meant code or anything, but I can tell you the one thing that I do admire, you never complained about anything. There
yeah.
was no, I visited you for like 2 or 3 days. There was zero complaints. It was just like,
It's good
let's
time.
fucking do it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of goes back to like knowing where you like in my head I always know where I came from, and when I say like a little village in like northern Pakistan, it's kind of a remote area. It's not a big city, and a lot of it is just people and community, and it's like it's farm life, it's village life. And we went back maybe once or two or three times, and now I try to go more frequently just to
Yeah.
kind of keep what I used to think was maybe a negative, which now I think is a positive, that dual language, that ability to communicate, culture, all that stuff. But anyways, you growing up, you remember that. Like, hey, there's always a potential that we're gonna have to go back to a place where, we were less fortunate
Yeah.
and less fortunate more or less in terms of like what the Western standard is of things. And so growing up, it was always like, okay, like I know what I can lose, I know what I have, and I'm trying to figure out what I can gain. But I think the biggest was always that like little sense of purpose that the family puts on you. Like, hey, what are you gonna do? And also feeling a need to fill a role. So, and maybe that's me talking about how my young stuff was, but that's what I felt when I was younger. It's like I have a role to fill in
Yeah.
terms of like how am I going to help my dad? How am I going to help my mom? And then high school was just that. High school was a means to get somewhere. I try to enjoy high school, right? Because it's not coming back. It's not going to happen again. And I thought it was an amazing experience with our group of people. It was a it was like all the brown kids kind of come
I
together.
felt like we
All
were
of
the
our,
Motley Crue. We were.
podcasts together, and it was like a mixture, and it was always fun, and it was. I wouldn't change any of that stuff, and it was good. And uh, high school was, fortunately for me, it was a good time, and it was like an easy time in terms of growing up, and I think the community of people that we had helped. But that just set me up for college in the way of like, all right, the next step after high school is college. And going from where I was in high school to college was also a shift because like college is expensive, man. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? I think you went over to VCU and we were gonna, I think at some point even room together.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. You know,
um,
that was actually like a big like we were gonna be roommates, and then you
yeah,
decided, which I completely understand. It was more important
yeah,
probably to be closer towards like your family and
it
everything.
was family and it was like finances and it was cheaper and things like that. But it from high school to where I am now, I'll be honest, I was very underprepared for the things that like I needed to do. I think so. Like my family was just like, "Hey, you're going to go into medicine." That's all I was told. So
Right.
you go from high school to college, and you're like, "I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have no idea how I'm going to afford this." So I got some. I picked up work. I was working in high school, and then I picked up work in college, and would
You
work
worked at the Best
throughout
Buy,
college.
right? You worked at
Yeah,
the
there was
Best Buy,
Best
right?
Buy, there was Sony, there was like Home
You were
Depot.
always working.
Dude, I was always working. And college was fun in a way because you get a bit, you're now working, you have money, you have a lot more expenses. But for me, it was also a little bit of a struggle because I went from high school where I was performing a little bit better in grades and you had
Yeah.
like the outlet of sports and things like that to now college where it's a little bit harder to perform at a higher level. And I don't realize this till towards the end where like, hey, my GPA and stuff and my is like not med school criteria. You know, I
Yeah.
finished with like a 3.4, 3.5, and I had like I finished early, dual major, all that kind of stuff while working, and then you apply to med school, and it's like super competitive. So then it didn't work out well on that front, and I had an option of waiting like a year to two to kind of boost my resume and then reapplying, or I go to the Caribbean and I do med school there. So I just took whatever's the quickest option because at
Yeah.
that point it's when you're finishing college and I'm thinking about like career, like how am I going to have a sustainable income? How am I going to do something that I want to do? And how am I going to still kind of go towards this goal that I kind of has been put on me from like childhood? And it worked out. Fortunately, I got in and then did all the right stuff. And med school was no walk in the park. It was just a lot of work in the sense of studies, but it was good because you get away from all the other distractions. Like when I stopped working and
You
kind
were
of
on
put
the
all my
island, right?
effort,
You were in
yeah, yeah, it was
what is
in
it, Bahamas?
Dominica, um, and it was the isolation of that, and then just kind of prioritizing school. I think puts you in a different mode, and not for everyone. Like there's about a 50% dropout rate. But yeah, we were lucky enough that again, you find the right people that kind of keep you supported,
Yeah.
and we did that. And then med school ended, and then fortunately enough, got did a lot of work in the States in terms of different hospitals, networking, kind of all those things, and eventually for med school, it was residency in DC, and then spent like 7 years in 8 years in DC training and then just finished recently in like 2019 and I've been working as like kind of feeling like the big boy job in a way because
Yeah.
when you're training I think what a lot of people maybe do or don't understand is that you go from when we're like finishing high school we're teens, right? You go to college and I don't really consider us in college as adults. We're just adults by a number, but like our thought is not the same to that degree until you get some of us or not all of us but like the degree of responsibility and all that stuff in college changes. But you go from college, you're just the student and you're a student in med school and you're almost a student all throughout training, you never really, I feel a lot of us are always kind of considered as like kid in all of it. And then you go and you finish, and now all of a sudden, like you're working independently, which is very different from
Yeah.
having your whole life as a student to being uh, the doer in a way.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, at that kind of like phase of your life, you're always still at the end of the day, you still know that you have to still be a student, but you also know that you gotten some
Oh
kind
yeah,
of experience where like you have a duty to teach and give back and do that. I think I've been there with you when we were at in that New York apartment and just kind of explaining the struggles, like how you were
yeah,
going through that.
yeah.
I
That
do remember
was,
that vividly, or just kind of remember that, and you bringing that back up and everything. It's like
yeah,
the struggle is what makes the story. I think you
yeah.
know,
It's that was like, I mean, I went from like, yeah, during college you're working, and even no matter how much you work as a full time, part time kid in like college, you were making like $8 to $9 an hour to maybe 10 an hour. I can put in like 80 hours a week, and my end of the month paycheck was maybe like 1,200 bucks. And then when you start residency, which is right after med school, which is what I was doing, or not even I was doing rotations in New York. You're not making any money. So even that 1,200 that I was getting in college is now supplemented by like the 600 to 800 bucks that I get from my loan check, which is why I had that apartment, man. That's all I could afford.
yeah.
And but I like, for me it was great because I had a bed, I had a shower, and I was in New York City, man. It was like
You
it's
literally
when
slept in the
you
closet. I think
yeah,
I
you do
slept
the
in the
simple
closet.
things.
And it was like one of the hottest days or like the hottest weekends
It
ever. But
was.
I do remember that vividly, and just being in there, I was like, oh shit. And then you were walking like really fast because you had been a New Yorker for a while. And that
And
was
I
one of
don't
the
walk
big things.
fast, man. But I think that goes for like anyone who's been in a low income state and in a city, or I would say low income state in general. You kind of appreciate just whatever you got,
Yeah,
and
you
that's kind of
have
what it
to.
was. Yeah,
I
it
think I
was good.
remember coming out of college thinking like, oh, I'm gonna make some big bucks and stuff. And
Yeah,
then I actually like coming out of college, like I was ahead of like some of my friends where like I graduated. To be honest, like I graduated 4.5 years, but that was actually considered early amongst like some of my friends and
yeah,
stuff. But
yeah,
4.5 years, I was like, I was late.
yeah,
I was trying to get out there at 4, but I got 4.5 years. But then my first job that I got was with actually a pretty big real estate commercial firm, but I didn't
yeah.
know anything. I didn't know how to talk to people in a professional setting or anything. And then the
Right.
first, like, I was thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna get paid $50,000. You know what? The offer was for a year was $24,000. I was
Yeah,
like, oh well, I'm just gonna take it, right? It was like,
yeah.
it was a good job with a good title and stuff, so I was gonna build my resume. But I think like growing up, like you think you're gonna be like very successful and it's gonna be like very easy, but then you're like, oh man, there's gonna be like
No,
you hit all these like
it's a lot. Yeah.
roadblocks and struggles and like pivots and stuff that you need to make, especially in your career. So what do you specialize in now since
Yeah. Mine. Right now, it's Pulm Crit, or pulmonary critical care,
is that the heart?
and it's everything, man. So it's right now though. I don't do much Pulm anymore, and I just do all critical care. So it's all ICU from, hopefully no one has to be in the ICU, but it's obviously if you're in a dire state, or it's you need a little bit more attention, then
Yeah,
you're going to be placed in the ICU.
yeah,
And we cover everything.
yeah. So like during the pandemic, I know it was definitely crazy. When the pandemic happened to me, I was working in like luxury apartments, and that took a
Yeah,
big toll because it was like such a group of community of like a lot of people. But
yeah.
I didn't see like inside the medical profession and everything. Can you walk us a little bit about like how that affected like your career and how you saw things and how from your perspective? Of course, like
Yeah,
like the thing is like part of this podcast is really to just get the viewpoint from like other people. I know people have different
sure.
views on
Yeah, yeah.
COVID-19 and the pandemic and how it was treated, but more importantly, I just want to understand how like you saw it.
Yeah, fortunately or maybe unfortunately, the pandemic hit me right out of when I was finishing training. So I finished in 2019, and starting my actual like job as an independent physician working for the hospital. And that first year, you're always a little. Again, speaking on behalf of myself, is
Yeah.
you know that what you've done in terms of training, but you also haven't worked on your own. Usually there's always somebody that you can be like, hey, I'm a little unsure about this. What do you think? And in this, now you're kind of on your own, and the only thing you have to fall back on is yourself, and then a lot of the data that comes from these well-known institutions, studies, all those things. That first year, I think, was super rough and tough. Mainly, there was a physical demand, and then there was like an emotional demand. And
Right.
I think the community grasped how severe it was, because when you go from an average day volume of patients to like way beyond your capacity,
Yeah.
to the point where you're shutting areas down in the hospital to make room or beds available and or even staff available, was a big thing. And the physical demands of it were we were just there more. And I was lucky in the sense that I was single. I was not married at the time, and I didn't have kids. So like for me, it was a great opportunity to just like dive into this. And a lot of times for me, and maybe I think other people out there, is not work is sometimes a way that you distract yourself from life. And for me, it was a way to distract like all the chaos that was with COVID. Work, I was fortunate enough to once still be able to work, because a lot of people didn't have that opportunity. So
Right.
going into it, I felt like, okay, at least I'm blessed enough to like still be able to work, carry on, and get paid, and all those things. But then too, the actually take care of patients and people, and that's a big part of why we went into this.
Yeah.
What was horrible on it, man, was the I'm used to having families at bedside. I'm used to talking to people face to face, and you lost family visitation, and that was for a
Yeah.
public service. Like you're trying to keep people from getting sick, and then two, you see the patients are on their own, and a lot of people are not used to being on their own, especially when they're sick.
Yeah.
We're there, like the nursing staff is there. We'll go in, we'll chat, but we're kind of gowned in all this getup and all these other masks and stuff. So you're just seeing like somebody covered, and all you're seeing is their eyes, maybe. So it's like that vibe is not there. But the scary stuff was just how quickly people got sick and how poorly they did. Like we've seen this stuff before, like this type of pneumonia, that type of infection. We've seen it before. It happens in the winter. People get bad flu, people get bad bacterial infections, but it would be like one out of who knows how many. This was like every single person coming in, and it did
Yeah.
not care who you were, did not care what you did, it did not care of race. It was like we had people coming in, hey doc, it started off as a cough, and now there's nothing we can do to get your oxygen up. And we tried everything, we did all the things, and nothing would work. So then you're forced to go on the ventilators and things like that. And unfortunately, when you look at this type of infection to the lungs, the mortality rate was as high as like 45%.
Hmm.
So you knew that you were going to lose quite a bit of people. And then even those who did survive, not everyone survives well. And sometimes there's a lot of us who are blessed to be alive, but living, there's no guarantee like you're going to live well, and there's no
Yeah.
guarantee that life is going to be good for you now that you're living. So that whole process was tough, man. It was
Yeah.
2 years of a lot of crazy kind of working hours, while being kind of constantly, losing patients, and then,
Yeah. I'm sure
talking
that's
to families.
mentally was draining or emotionally draining as well too. And it's also, I mean, sure, like I think everybody has had major life changes after
Oh
the
yeah,
pandemic.
yeah,
I think it's crazy. I think I talk to my dad a lot and talk about like some of our friends and our generation has gone through a fair amount of stuff. I think with
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we
It's
like in high school it was September 11th.
yeah,
Uh, we went through that market crash in 2008, and then the pandemic. I think is one of the biggest things, especially as now like we're adults. Like I was working full time, I had kids, I had a house, and that
yeah,
time like the stress that you saw from inside or like saw was like completely different than what I saw. I'm from the
yeah,
outside in a different realm, in a different world and everything. You're seeing people like die, right? I think that perspective of death really changes a lot of people, and I think it's hard to face. I think where the pandemic has really kind of, to me, I think it opened up a lot of eyes, right?
yeah. I mean, we're used. I mean, maybe unfortunately, in the line of work that I do, it's like we're used to seeing death. Like you come to expect it with a certain group in terms of as we get older and as
Yeah,
we have a lot of medical problems. That's part of life. Like it's the only guarantee in life is that at one point we're going to pass. So it wasn't, we weren't, I don't think I was unfamiliar with that aspect. What was challenging was the sheer volume and the people that you didn't expect. Like there were 45-year-olds, there were like 50-year-olds that were otherwise healthy individuals that you were just now all of a sudden kind of like feeling helpless because whatever we were doing was not working.
yeah,
But the flip of that was, like you said, there was all of this stuff going on in the world with that, right? And I kind of would always be like, hey, look, it's blessed enough to still be able to show up, work, and have a purpose in whatever was going on. And that kind of carries you through. But the pandemic came and went, man, but it took a toll. I think it affected everyone in
I think it
a
did.
different ways. For some, they came out of it better. Some came out of it worse. Some just came out of it, and it was a challenge for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely shaped me as well too. I mean, you could look at it as a negative and stuff, but I think it's just a experience. I think great doctors, great people, use that experience and kind of work with your clients and customers and everything to kind of help them um in your practice and everything in yourself and your own life and stuff. Having like a fairly demanding life, with family, an intense job of like having to like manage career and getting your certifications and staying up to date and everything. How
Yeah,
do you yourself? I mean, you're also going to be a future father as well too. So, uh,
yeah,
those things. How do you stay grounded in like you yourself, Dr. Mo Cho,
yeah,
uh, and still continue to hold those values and not being like pulled away? Because I think a lot of times I think people struggle with just not being themselves. And
yeah,
when this talk is like I think you have like like foreign people, or like for me, I don't know if it's for the same for you, is that you just have like a sense of purpose that you have to like do something because your parents just made all the sacrifice to get here. It's like, how
yeah,
do you
yeah,
stay true, and like what practice, or like and then as you're built on community as well too, and like, how do
yeah.
you give back to that?
It's I think our experiences form kind of where we are. So for right now, like y- it's a load. That's a long question, man. I think
That'd
it's
be the last question.
you keep everything in the back of your head. And again, like where we were, and with the reality of the potential of everything could be gone in a day. Like I said, I'm used to death in a way, and you're used to seeing people come and go, unfortunately. And I know that there's no guarantee for me to have a tomorrow or like a 5 year or a 10 year. I'll still plan for all those things, but at the same time, I'm also thinking I'm lucky today to be alive, and then tomorrow something could happen and take place. So you're kind of in a way aware of what could happen, and so that keeps you for me like going. a way of just trying to do what I can on a day to day. But then also it's realizing that there is no like perfect solution to everything. There is no like I think in the game of life, like just being alive is winning and being able to do things is winning.
Yeah.
We're chasing these like things all the time, and it kind of leaves me. I think when I get to that point where I'm like, I need to do this, I need to do that, I'm like, what? None of that makes sense. Like, where am I? Just bring it back down, keep it simple. You know, remind myself of how things were when I had nothing, when you have less, and then just try to enjoy the process, man.
Yeah.
And that's how I keep up with things, but also like prioritize in my head, knowing what is priority first. And it goes back to like the upbringing of family. So like family first, then comes like everything else. And the work aspect of it is just there so I can help live my life. Like I love what I do and I enjoy what I do, but that alone I don't think defines like who we are. And you
Yeah.
don't need like I'm not a guy of like titles and things. I think everyone has value and everyone has a story, and we can always learn from the other guy in a way. Um, but for what keeps me in that kind of state of mind, I don't know. I think it's just kind of always acknowledging and being aware that all of it could go away. So then you have to enjoy what you have when you have it.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I
in a
keep
way,
telling
it's like,
people like I'm blessed to have the problems that we have. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like we're here, we're sitting in our rooms and we're communicating, we're talking, we're chatting, we have the ability to go work out, we have the ability to go to work, and on every level of that, I in my head, I'm like, you know, I could be physically debilitated, I could be like mentally in a state where I can't, or I just could be in a environment where there is no job, where there is no house, there is no home. So I think that's whether you're a person of faith, whether you're not, I think that's a reality that you just kind of have to have. Is like I am blessed to have the things that I have, and I know that at any point in time they can be taken away.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good perspective. It's a similar perspective, and I have now as I've gotten seen through a lot of things. And for me, especially seeing like, I've gone through a fair amount of things of just feeling like ups and downs of life.
Yeah,
And then really like, what you said is just that we're all still trying to just figure it out at the end of the day. It's like we don't really ever have it completely figured out, right?
yeah,
I think more in a way that we're always trying to figure it out instead of actually just being okay with it. I think you have a sense of gratitude that you have, that even the small things of just, for me, and I do talk a lot about it, is just the small things, just having like a roof over your head, food in the fridge. For me, is like when I look in the refrigerator, and that actually, like, somebody has asked me, I was like, how do you stay so disciplined in
yeah,
your nutrition, especially when it comes to like bodybuilding? And I always start to look back of like, the things where I started. I started bodybuilding in college. I was just eating cans of tuna and cans of chicken and stuff. And
yeah,
now, like, I could have some steak, I could have some
yeah.
salmon, which is a little bit nicer quality of food and stuff. But really, just reflecting on some of the stuff that you started with really drives you and gets you like motivated. I don't even say it's like motivation. It's more of just something that becomes you, where like you don't where you came from, but you don't ever want to go back to that place. I think I've had this conversation many times. It's like with my brothers and stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
where you come from, right? Which is good, but you don't ever want to go back into that
Yeah.
spot and stuff. And that what keeps us kind of like motivated and driven.
It keeps the drive alive. It keeps that purpose kind of going. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's it's all it's a everything comes together, man. It's I think fortunate for all the people kind of that can like all the things that happen in our life. Like there's going to be good ones, there's going to be bad ones. I remember stuff from like high school teachers, English teachers of like, hey, you have to give respect to get respect. Like
Yeah.
all these little things kind of shape us, and then our experiences shape us. And then like you're talking about what in college training and things like when you are in need of something, you become innovative. necessity drives innovation and things like that. So it's keeping that thought in the back, like staying grounded, I think is
Yeah.
a huge plus for me. And just having the ability to do it is also like a plus, because it's in the day of like mental health and all those challenges. I think there's stressors that come across for people that not everyone, there are days you have bad days and you're not
Yeah.
able to get back to that kind of grounded place. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think being aware of all of that is also very important.
What do you
I
think
kind
is
of,
the big what do you think is the biggest challenge that us society, right? Not just men, but people in humanity as well too, as like you see, because there's
I
different
think,
perspective, like biggest
yeah,
challenges that we have.
I think there's different levels. I think there's different levels to a lot of things. One of the big things in life that is hard to understand and I think digest is like nothing is actually promised to us. Where we are fortunate of where we're born, we are fortunate of where we are come across, but even no matter where you're at, nothing. There's nothing that says your life has to be good,
Yeah.
and I kind of keep that with me in the sense of like whatever you're doing is like make the you I have to make the best out of it, and good or bad, that's the kind of mindset I try to have. um and I think that's how you move forward, man.
Yeah. It's kind of like a
And I
very
don't know if that's an immigrant thing. Like, I don't know if I can't say that's just an immigrant thing, because I think there's a lot of people who have stories from the States, growing up, different families, different things.
well.
But if we all,
For me and from my perspective, I think a lot of people are having challenges handling with a lot of the new stresses and a lot of new
yeah,
changes that are coming. And I think people that are fairly able, I mean, I can't say like we're successful or anything, but like we have to like, it's necessity that we have to
yeah,
learn how to manage this and like do what's necessary to make sure that, hey, we are mentally there and physically there as well too. So I think there's a need for mental health support, physical support
yeah.
in that area and stuff, and that's where.
I will say what helps in a like being a migrant family and that stuff is having all your family still around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my parents live with me. I have my siblings that are close. I have my cousins that are close. I have my family that's close. So there's a lot of outlets of people that get you already. And I think that helps out, is that, when there's a roller coaster ride of days, it's like I have people that I can easily kind of fall back on versus being in an isolated area or not having that family vibe or community. Or even within a family, like everyone is kind of, you're associated because you're siblings, but you're not like siblings all the time. And as we
Yeah,
get older, I think that becomes harder and harder because everyone's got different lives that they're living. But having that community around me still, like how I used to have it when I was young, I think is a huge help. Like, I think you still have your brothers around. Like, if you can easily go see them, visit them.
yeah.
When your kids go and see your kids, your cousins and stuff, that's a different vibe that I think keeps everyone on the same page.
It is a different vibe. I think it's more like for me, like we have, and it's kind of like it's like a village, you know. I
Yeah,
think
it takes a
for me,
village,
like
man.
it does take a village, and I think that that's a leeway into like one thing is like you're gonna become a father yourself. What do
Yep.
you do? When's your
I
baby
think
due?
we're in mid August. Yeah.
Mid August. Do you know if you're gonna have a boy or girl yet, or?
Baby girl, man. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We're excited. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, I mean, what are you most excited about being a father?
It's now that I pause, I think everyone's gonna be like, "Hey, why are you pausing?" I think it's the ability to like just have someone else who's hopefully you can make their life a little better than yours, right?
Hmm.
Um, and just giving them maybe some of the opportunities that you didn't have. But I'm always kind of stuck on that too. But most exciting, I think, is just being able to have another individual that is part of you, and like part of you is in them. and just help them grow. That's
Yeah.
really it. Just helping them grow, I think is going to be the funnest part of it.
Yeah. Parenting is definitely a game changer, or like, it's a whole different perspective. Well, I'm sure you've seen it, raising like your sisters and like cousins and everything. But I think one, it's gonna be your own. I think there's gonna be
Yeah,
uh
kids are tricky, man. Yeah,
they're
it's
gonna be
I'm fortunate enough, man, that it's we're having a kid at an age where I'm almost hitting 40. So you've seen a lot of life, you've kind of grown with a lot of things, and I've seen a lot of people. It's not the same, having your own kid versus like taking care of other kids and things like that. But I feel I'm at a good point where I've learned a lot from life in a way, and I've learned a lot of experiences of people with their kids, how things are. So you kind of know what to expect.
nice.
And no matter how well you prepare, I know with kids is like you're always going to fall short. But I think knowing that it's going to be a good time. And
Yeah.
no matter what it is, it's again always try to be reminder of like how blessed you are having, because I think unfortunately, not there's a whole community of people who can't have kids and children and things like that. So I'm just excited, man, to be able to have a child, and I'm just praying and hoping that she's healthy, and just looking forward to, helping somebody grow, man.
Yeah, man. I'm sure you're gonna be a fantastic father. I
I
think
hope
one of
so.
those being a father is for me, when I became a father, it really, I mean, I was ready to grow. I think that's probably gonna be the biggest thing. I'm always about growth and everything, and challenges that
Yeah,
that really pushes you. But I have two girls and stuff, and being more emotionally intelligent, more learning
yeah,
myself, learning how to manage myself and my emotions and stuff. That's what really pushed me. But really giving like perspective, and that really shows like what sacrifices your parents made when they
yeah,
were kids and stuff. And the thing is, like, now we are fortunate. Like, I think sometimes people struggle with like the parents and the family of like the parents do their best they can to give what they
yeah,
can,
yeah,
emotional support and everything. And then sometimes it's like, there's limitations that they have as well too. And we have to like really understand like what their intentions are. I think every intention of a parent is to make them as successful as they can. You know,
yeah.
I think, when I go through like parenting myself, and there's times where I'm like, God, I shouldn't have said that. I was a little too short, or, really wasn't understanding of them and stuff. It really like puts things into perspective, and really starting to think like what you say and do as starting to like study how the brain works and stuff could really
Yeah.
affect them a lot in their life and
Oh, for
stuff.
sure,
So
for sure. And
yeah.
I think something you mentioned is like how hard parenting was. Is I have to keep reminding myself, even when we were growing up, like, hey, our parents were actually just kids. Like, think about like yourself at age 25 and yourself at age 35. At what point do feel like when you're by yourself, do you feel like you're an adult or do you still feel like you're a kid? And you're just adulting because you're doing these tasks that have been put forward on you. And I think I look back and I'm like, oh, but our parents were just like kids trying to do the right stuff with
Yeah,
what
it's
they
true.
had.
I mean, the thing is,
And
like, there comes a point in life, like when I was in college, I was like, oh, I'm an adult. But then you're at 38, you look back and you're like, I was not an adult. I was an
no,
absolute
no, man.
child.
Yeah, and I think that's how I look at a lot of people as well. Is I think we're all good at certain things that we do, and but I think we're all kind of going through that same process, a similar struggle of things, and that's another way, kind of like, hey, the people I'm talking to, communicating with, everyone's got their own story, everyone's got something going on, and I don't know when or if somebody is really just like an adult. I think we're just like kids that are growing as we go and learning new things as we go.
Yeah.
And that's something that always sticks with me. It's like I don't know when you become an adult, um, and I hope I never do. I hope there's always like a steady line of goofiness of like not knowing of like maybe it is. And
You do still gotta have that child like behavior. I think the only thing that I know, and you and me are big on this, is like we still like, you watch cartoons, I still
oh
watch
yeah,
some anime, and
yeah, yeah,
that kind of keeps us that childhood. I watch Dragon Ball. You've been
yeah.
watching a lot of like different type of animes, and I'm
It,
solely Dragon Ball.
and we could do it. You could do an episode on anime. It's I think what people when it gets dismissed early, people don't see the depth of it, and you can go really deep into a lot of these stories. But as like watching it when you're growing up, they had a lot more messages that I got out of
Yeah,
them and those shows that I got out of like any like mainstream media outlet or movie. And even now, it's like the core values are there, but it's also it's lighthearted stuff. At least
yeah,
usually I do it just to kind of bring me back down, kind of disconnect a little bit. But it doesn't matter what you're reading or you're looking at. If the message is there, then and if it's a good message, I think it's good.
yeah.
Whatever works.
I think one of my favorite is Dragon Ball. I remember I watched that as a kid, and in grown like watching it as a kid, it was more childlike, and then watching it as an adult, you start to understand like the philosophies and how deep it is,
Yeah,
and it's so interesting. But
and I
I
think a
think
lot
that
of them have like the stories of the underdog, right? Like in a lot of those, there's always like
like an underdog
the
story.
character who has to overcome something, 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 and I think we all relate to it. And I think it's got a huge fan base now because kids are relating to those things. They're relating to like, hey, I relate to this struggle. I relate to this story in some way. Granted, a lot of it is fantasy, but like the core underneath it, I think is there.
Yeah,
Um, and it's good for some people, and some people it's not, and that's okay. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, we're gonna be fans of it, and any for me, it's like anything that inspires me and gets me to think in like a positive mindset. I think it's fantastic. But
yeah,
fantastic, man. I think we're getting to close to the end of the show, and I think
sure,
I
yeah,
want to thank you for the discussion in life and everything. I always get so much wisdom from my buddy here, and I think the perspective I also want to share before my last thought, and then you could share your last thought before we head out, is that like friendships, like we're busy, like we all have each other's lives and stuff, and then just being very understanding of like what the other person is going through, and understanding some of their struggles and stuff, and then we all choose different lives and everything, but I think coming back and just reconnecting and having those friendships that that kind of help supports through our lifetimes. And for me, I've always had like groups of friends and seasons of friends, but then there's those group of friends that you just keep from that pocket and then continue to keep for the rest of your life and everything. And I think
yeah,
our friendship, I think, is one of those friendships that I want to make sure that like we're still growing, we still have friends, like we'll be there at each other's how morbid it is,
sure,
and it's the honest truth. Like I think about my funeral, I think about my death, like I don't know when I'm gonna go as well
yeah,
too. So that's why there's so much urgency in work, and I think that for me is what drives me to continue to stay motivated and disciplined in what I'm doing now. It's friends, it's having this connection to my community and everything, and giving back. Now it's that I've gained experience and I gained a lot of things and done a lot of things and stuff. And money is always an important factor of how like fast and what you can do and stuff. But I think more
yeah,
importantly for me is by being a service to anybody in our community and spreading that good
yeah.
message of personal development. So one last thought before we head out from Dr. Mocho, and maybe what you want to see and put out there in the ether, the
Yeah, man.
universe.
I think the last brief thoughts are just life is short, so try to make the most of it and try to be impactful in a good way, in a positive way to all levels of your community, from your small little home to your neighborhood to your work to like, and then to your country, to the world. I think
Yeah.
do life is short. try to make the best of it and be helpful to your society, to the people, and that's it, man. Just there's so many other things, but I think that those are like sum up a lot of things. I think that's just it.
Yeah,
Live life.
I mean,
And
that's
do good.
that's a great message, man. Just really continue to be good. Continue
Yeah.
to be. I think continue to be good when it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Continue to be good when it's hard. I think that's a good point. I think that's maybe what I want to add on to that. But well, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you, Dr. Mocho, for being on the podcast and being a guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Feel free to share this with your network, your friends and family and everything. So proud of you and your hard work and your family as well too. I'm sure you'll continue to be successful in that. And then also with your new baby on the way is exciting. It's an exciting new chapter in your life, actually. If you ever need any support, baby shower, gifts, and things like that, let me know.
We'll be in touch, man. Yeah.
And I got, I got the experience of two girls. Definitely challenging, but it's worth it. It makes you grow as a person as well too. So even your world of experience right now, you're gonna be next level like Yoda. When the baby comes, you're gonna have to like
more than everything
down. Yeah. Okay. Well, keep us updated with anything, and we're here to support you if you need anything else. Dr. Mocho is a private man, so this is where you're only gonna get it.
He's the most I've talked in a while.
He said, "Don't bother me. I'm doing my thing." But yes, I appreciate you having me or coming on the podcast. Okay.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
man.